If you've seen my video where I ranked all the episodes in season 1 of One Punch Man, you might remember that I said this at the end of it. Maybe I'll do season 2 as well someday, but don't count on it. There are other shows I would much rather cover instead. Guess what I wanted to do within a few weeks of that video coming out. So, One Punch Man season 2. Let's rip this band-aid off right at the start. Yes, the animation is worse than it was in season 1. It was really hurt by the change in studios and the general working conditions within the anime industry. Season 1 looked amazing, but it really got to shine with its action scenes, showing off plenty of dynamic and smooth animation. In season 2, while I don't mind how it looks during the talking scenes, is a noticeable step down with the action. There's a lot more reliance on motion tweens, having actions happen off screen, motion blur and screen shakes to cover rapid clashes, less collateral damage resulting in big hits feeling weaker and not as impressive for the recipient to survive, less examples of the more detailed close-ups, and so on. There's still enough cool shit happening to where I don't dislike a lot of the fights, but they aren't even coming close to the peaks of season 1. Now, I'm not establishing this out of the gate because I couldn't wait to tear into the exact same thing everyone else already disregards this entire season over. It's quite the opposite actually. Because this is a near universal problem for every episode, I want to put it in the intro to get it out of the way. It's a problem that affects the bulk of the season, even if not quite as much in the final 3 episodes. And I don't want to sound like a broken down record repeating the exact same criticism 12 times, except for in a few special cases. Just know that even though I won't be mentioning the issue much, it is present even in a lot of my favourite episodes. With that said, how did the rest of the season fare? Surprisingly much better than I expected. The animation is the only aspect of this that I'd say is a significant step down from season 1. I still don't think it'd be quite as good even if animation was taken completely out of the equation. The first season did still hit stronger highs and had a more climactic and impactful final battle. And even comparing the quality of individual episodes, I had the series premiere ranked at number 5 out of 12 last time, and it is running circles around anything I'm going to be talking about today. But here, the characters are still endearing and likeable, I was consistently laughing at the jokes, the emotional beats had me invested, and Saitama's internal struggles continue to lead to some compelling self-reflection. Every other strength season 1 had that wasn't in the visuals applies here as well, even if to a lesser degree. I had a really great time going through it all, enjoying every single episode a good amount, and I'm excited to start ranking them all. Much like last time, there are no guidelines or rules or whatever. If I like it more, it ranks higher, simple as that. Now, let's get started.
You can't talk to me that way. A 6-year-old girl could talk to you that way.
Episode 5, the Martial Arts Tournament. Why does Geno's clapping make normal clapping sounds and not metal clangs? Garbage episode. Okay, but for real, this is the first episode of the show I'd have a hard time saying I particularly love. Not that it was bad, it was overall still pretty good, just not one that grabbed me to the same extent as anything that came before it. The best stuff is the Garo vs Metal Bat fight. I really liked seeing Bat keep getting back up and putting even more behind his swings despite how well Garo was able to dodge everything. It lets both of them look cool without turning the other into a pushover. I also like how Metal Bat's primed to get the kill by catching Garo by surprise that he can keep going, since last episode showed that Garo has no idea what the limits of his refusal to give up are. But ultimately Garo is saved by Metal Bat's sister showing up, since he won't let her witness any violence. Yeah, it's kinda silly that she came looking for him in the middle of a monster invasion when she's just a normal kid and he's a pro hero, but I don't know, I thought it was pretty sweet. As is Garo backing off without hurting her, giving further indication that he may not be as much of a monster as he wants to admit before he later rips up the invitation to join the Monster Association. One of my favourite jokes of the season is also how after his adrenaline let him push through wave after wave of abuse from Garo, now that the heat of battle is worn off, Metal Bat ends up getting knocked out completely accidentally by his sister trying to stop him from going off and getting himself killed. Then after that is mostly just set up for the tournament and a bunch of fights between various heroes and the now invading monsters. I like that they make the monsters more threatening by showing that they have knowledge on who's best suited to go after each hero, but otherwise there's nothing after Garo rips up the letter I find particularly investing. And that's not really a problem. This isn't intended to be some big epic climactic conclusion. Its goal is just to set things up, and it does that effectively. It's all still enjoyable, with some highlights being Saitama's funny interactions with the other tournament participants, the sick transition between Ring's attack and the whip of the succubus monster, who I really do not like, and I take back everything mean I said about Mosquito Girl, Silverfang getting to show how much grumpier he got in his old age by brutally murdering Machamp Pokemon, and the raising of the stakes by having the monsters kidnap the son of the executive guy. They do leave the executive though. I know it's Prawley so he'll be more willing to bargain, but at the same time please take him, I beg of you. And that's about the gist of the episode. The start is great, the rest is just solidly good stuff that by design isn't a highlight of the season because we're not yet meant to be at the meat and potatoes of the invasion yet.
Oh my god, it's a monster!
Episode 6, The Monster Uprising. This is a pretty good episode that I have hilariously little to say about in comparison to the rest of them. Most of the tournament fights are entirely off screen and that's kinda lame, but Genos gets to fight some monsters on screen and that's pretty cool. It was neat seeing him strategize to have the knife guy strike his head to give him an opening, and using the adhesive to take care of the cockroach guy that he previously couldn't land a hit on. I like that his fight with Sonic is what got him to install this in the first place because something Tony learns from his mistakes. We also get Suryu explaining his motives while Saitama is taking a shit elsewhere before he lays out Snake, and the shocking upset that the martial arts amateur Chiranko beat the guy who was predicted to win the entire thing. Tatsumaki comes in to fight the succubus lady and unfortunately lets her get away. So that means she has the chance to show back up again, joyous. But the twisted, dismissive form of care she shows for Fubuki makes me more interested to learn about their history as sisters and what they've been through together. I also found Chibi Tatsumaki pretty funny. They show the tension ramping up as several S-class heroes are down and more monsters are forcing even more of them into the fight. Goketsu is foreshadowed to come in the next few episodes. Orochi is foreshadowed for later in the story, showing that he's pulling the strings. Garo doesn't really do anything in this episode, but they do set up his bout with Watchdog Man. I think I might be out of things to say already. Nothing amazing here, but a pretty good episode that I really liked.
Hello, my name is Saitama. What's shaking?
Episode 2, The Human Monster. I was worried about this one going in because I remember it having the first scene in the series that I outright dislike. For as much as I love the first two Saitama vs Sonic confrontations, this one falls entirely flat for me. I took slight issue with the second episode of season 1 having Saitama use his consecutive normal punches on a completely throwaway antagonist, but at the very least that was to set it up for the season finale. Said finale also gave us our first proper showing of the Serious series, which Saitama only broke out to take care of a planet-busting attack and defeat the strongest antagonists in the series up until that point. So what if he used it on Sonic? You know, the incredibly one-sided rivalry Saitama has where he didn't even register him as a threat while he was actively in the process of blowing up a street. While he was actively looking for a villain to fight, no less. Yeah, let's have him use a serious move on him that doesn't even knock him out. I don't get why they do that, it goes against the entirety of what makes the rivalry funny. It'd be like having the Roadrunner fight back seriously against Wile E. Coyote, you just don't do that. The delivery of the attack is also incredibly limp with the impact shot before any sound effects. It feels way weaker than the sideways jumps he did for his physical exams. Turns out though, that's the only bad part of the episode, the rest is all pretty great. I love Garo's introduction. He steals the show with how quickly and easily he mangles and dismantles the trio of A-class heroes at the presentation, then completely silently takes out all of the criminals while Sitch is cowering behind his podium. They even managed to make the limited animation of the fight scene work by having Garo's attacks land off screen so the brutality of them gets to be revealed to us after the fact. This episode also acts as Fubuki's proper intro after she, like King, was previously only a background character with one prominent OVA appearance. And I quite like her in this. I love how unfazed Saitama is in their initial greeting despite her efforts to be intimidating. And I do quite like the conflicting ideologies between the two as they tell the other that they won't get by in the hero business with how they go about it. Fubuki bullies weaker heroes into joining her gang so that she can feel superior, but Saitama is so naturally strong both physically and in character that he attracts strong and high-ranking people to be around him anyway. He even gets to show off more of his genuine heroism when he protects her from Genos' stray blasts despite having no reason to. Her reaction to King showing up is funny as well, as is Saitama swatting away the two henchmen. That's the second time they make the minimal animation in the fight scenes work in this episode, but this time it's for comedic effect rather than a brutal reveal. Mask's quick, precise and efficient slaughter of Captain Caveman brings that up to 3, go figure. To my surprise though, the Genos vs Sonic fight, despite setting my hopes low with the motion tweens when they interrupt Saitama vs Fubuki, does have some pretty smooth shots and solid choreography. Sonic is using his speed advantage to try and keep his distance, while Genos is actively going behind him as much as possible, even ripping off his ponytail and trying to catch him out as he lands. And I like that Saitama's the one to take Genos out so that he doesn't nuke his house while tunnel visioning on the fight. And I've said my piece on the Saitama vs Sonic fight that follows it, but at the very least, I like the shot of Saitama with the menacing text around him. It has the same energy to me as the one from the Carnage Kabuto encounter, and while that one is better because of how befuddled he is, this one isn't too far off. So yeah, colour me pleasantly surprised. The one bad scene that I remembered was not indicative of the quality of the entire episode. Said bad scene does mean that this is by default the weakest episode of the series up until the point where it came out, and yet the rest of it was enjoyable enough to where I loved it all the same.
Defeated a martial arts master with his but...
Episode 7, the Class S Heroes. This is another episode split into two distinct halves. The first half shows more of the titular S-Class heroes getting involved in the fight. Watchdog Man is attacked by a monster that beats Garo to the punch, Drive Knight threatens to torture a monster if he doesn't get the information he wants, Pig God vores this snake lady after shrugging off her poison, Flashy Flash saves some of the lower ranked heroes before Tatsumaki comes in and steals his kill. It's all solid stuff. Plenty of both cool and funny moments all throughout. The best scene in this half though is Atomic Samurai meeting with the Holy Order of the Sword and asking for their aid in hunting Garo, with 3 of the others agreeing to lend a hand while the last dude reveals that he'd been given a monster cell in an order to kill Atomic. This both introduces the concept of the monster cells and gives us this sick as hell one-stroke duel. The second half is about the final match of the tournament, and I know I've been trying to avoid the comparison between the fights here and in Season 1, but I couldn't shake thinking how sick this could have been if the animation quality was up to that par. The choreography is solid, and it provides a rare case of a Saitama fight where there are actual stakes involved. There's actual tension in seeing if he'll be able to keep his wig on the whole time, and Suiryu does land some devastatingly brutal looking moves. But the motion blur rapid attacks make some parts of it come across as kinda limp, I'm not gonna lie. Still, there's a decent sense of speed to it all, it has some really cool bits, it's an overall good scene, just not quite on the level of something like Genos vs Deep Sea King or the Class S Heroes vs Melzaguards. And the actual fighting isn't the highlight of the segment of the episode anyway, because as cool as it is, I was more grabbed by the clash of ideals between the characters. Suiryu is such an interesting juxtaposition to Saitama. They both sought greater strength for a better life, but for completely opposite reasons. Saitama longs for a challenge to push him, but Suiryu just wants an easy laid-back life that he can breeze through with ease. And while Saitama has the values of a hero, Suiryu mocks them. They're just contaminants getting in the way of his fun. This clearly touches a nerve with Saitama, and he gets one of my favourite of his lines here. The genuine advice that if all Suiryu wants to do is have fun with his life, he shouldn't get any stronger. It's like he sees an older version of himself in Suiryu and doesn't want him to end up in the same rut that he finds himself in now. This is followed by the more comedic end to the fight. Saitama misses the points of martial arts completely, takes Suiryu out on complete accident by bumping his ass into him, and then the payoff to the bit of him not knowing how to tie his obi is that his pants fall down in front of everyone. Magnificent. I also love Sourface's reaction to the reveal of Saitama being bald, and the assumption that the two finalists were talking about the non-existent hardships they faced throughout the rest of the tournament. Sourface in general might be one of my favourite parts of this tournament arc the more I think about it. He's really funny. Overall, a very strong episode. The action could have been a little better, but otherwise there's very little for me to complain about. Plenty of characters got to shine here, and Saitama got probably the closest thing he said to a legitimate challenge in the show so far, even if that was entirely brought on by the tournament's rules.
They're not gonna discipline Garo.
Episode 10, Justice Under Siege. Much like last season's episode 10, this doesn't give me especially much to discuss on its own merits. It sets up the approaching threats really well with the parasite creature sneaking into the Hero Association to deliver a message before Darkshine claps him. Orochi gets a cool scene where he vores the Cockroach Man and establishes himself as the strongest monster. Garo wakes up and assumes that King beat the shit out of him, which is amazing. Genos gets some upgrades, Saitama and King play some video games, and it's funny how much of a sore loser Saitama is in contrast to his desire for a proper fight in reality. It's all really good, but doesn't give me much to talk about until the latter portion. Tario meets Garo again in his secret clubhouse where he's been hiding out, demanding him to leave because his friends told him to. And Garo, empathizing with the kid being pushed around by his peers, tells him to get stronger so that he can stand up for himself. It's kinda sweet in a way. In return for his very layered and nuanced advice, he asks to see the hero handbook again as Death Gatling, who spotted him earlier, has gathered 7 other heroes to join the fight and finally bring the hero hunter down, all while trying to prove the capability of the non-S-class heroes. This shit right here is where the episode peaks for me. The fight scene has some actually pretty good animation and sets the stakes perfectly. Garo could wipe these guys out easily under normal circumstances, especially now that the handbook has clued him in on all of the trump cards. But in his incredibly weakened state, the numbers advantage poses a genuine threat to him, and they show how these heroes have been perfectly picked to cover long, short, and medium range combat, with Death Gatling standing to the side and Resurrection F Gohan providing support and perimeter control. It managed to get me more invested than any prior fight this season because it initially left me with no clue who was going to win during my first viewing. Would Garo overcome the insurmountable odds working against him? Would he manage to escape? Would these guys be the ones to bring him down, or would they last long enough for a top-ranking hero to step in and finish the job? It's such an effective cliffhanger because it sets up high stakes for both sides and it had me dying to see more. Again, like the Boros arc, the first episode isn't where the bulk of the discussion is supposed to come from, but damn does it start the season's climactic final 3 episodes incredibly well. Episode 4, The Metal Bat. Metal Bat was one of the few characters that made a particularly strong impression on me during the Class S hero meeting back in Season 1. I liked his bickering with Tatsumaki and his later contributions to the fight with Melzaguards. Now he gets a full episode to be one of the primary focuses, and I think it's pretty neat stuff. Garo laying out one of the association's executives last episode has them all on high alert, saying that any other high-ranking officials should only go out when absolutely necessary and take Class S protection with them. King refuses because he's playing a video game, and I love that they take it as him actually fighting monsters himself. So Metalbat is called in instead, forcing him to bail on shopping plans that he had with his little sister. What important business does this rich guy have to be out and about when there's potential danger? His son wants to try commoner food, so they went to a sushi restaurant where they look down on all of it and keep putting the plates back on the conveyor belt despite being repeatedly told not to. Between this and the creep from last episode, they've done great at making these snooty rich assholes out to be people I would not mind if a monster did happen to eat them. Garo doesn't end up finding them, but some monsters do, leading to some decent fights where Metalbat gets to show how he can keep pumping himself up to overcome when the odds are stacked against him by Venusaur and this weird centipede guy. Him winning though brings out an even bigger centipede guy, where he gets to show off his smarts by noticing a weak spot and then targeting that when he goes in for a second round. Then he gets tossed away to where Garo is, setting up their battle. This isn't one of the episodes where Garo's particularly active, but he got to do plenty in episode 3 before he got knocked out, so that's fine. Saitama chopping his lights out does end up giving us our first hint towards his motivations through this flashback. He always rooted for the underdog monsters when he was a kid because he thought they were cooler, and it was unfair that the popular heroes always got to win. Clearly a flawed outlook on it, but he is a literal child in this case, so I don't know what other takeaway you'd expect from him. Then he wakes up with no memory of what knocked him out. Said person that knocked him out is now entering the martial arts tournament. He puts down the wrong name for Chiranko's fighting style, which prompts Sourface to explain the rules against disguises in the tournament, how Garo caused that, and how he wants revenge for Garo's rampage at their old dojo. The exposition manages to make it so this tournament does have some stakes for Saitama now. He's in no physical danger as usual, but if he's sussed out as an imposter, then it could tank his hero career and land him with a fine. And there are plenty of jabs thrown in at Chiranko by his old colleague, thinking that he's actually talking to him and not some guy taking his place who just wants him to stop talking. But despite how little he cares about Chiranko, Saitama does stand up for him, saying that he chose to fight Garo while Sourface chose to run away, so he has no ground to stand on judging him. Paralleled by Moomin talking to the actual Chiranko, assuring him that Saitama's a hero, so he doesn't have anything to worry about with him committing identity theft for the tournament. I adore this episode. It's great at setting up a lot of stuff, from the rules and stakes of the tournament, one of the most prominent heroes and villains of the season, and the beginning of the main villain's motivation. It's not quite as heavy on the humor as some of the other episodes, but I did manage to get a good few laughs from Metalbat with the plates and him casually strolling past Garo after he thought Elder Centipede killed him. Not much more to say. It doesn't hit quite the same highs as some of my favourite episodes, but it is a consistently very enjoyable package from beginning to end.
I'm the king!
Episode 1, Return of the Hero. For some reason, when the season premiere initially dropped, I ended up thinking it was mediocre, even though I would then go on to love the rest of the season. I guess that week I must have just not been in the right headspace for it, or maybe the constant negativity surrounding the trailer I saw got to me. I don't know. What I do know is that rewatching this years later, I've fully come around to it. This is the episode to introduce us to King, someone who'd been a minor background character at most in Season 1, with his most extensive appearance being in one of the specials. They set him up as this mysterious figure with unimaginable strength who strikes terror into everyone he comes across. But then this episode reveals him to be a complete fraud in the same vein as someone like Hercule Satan, Reagan, or Kogoro Mori. The key difference here though is that those characters are still generally pretty capable as far as regular people go. They're only pathetic in the context of their stories, and they still get moments to show their competency in their fields. Not King though. He himself admits that he's even weaker and more cowardly than the average person, to the point where this big robot thing showing up makes him have a realistic depiction of. Anyway, King's great. One of my top 3 favourite characters in this series because of how funny I find how far they go with him in later arcs. I won't spoil any manga stuff here, but I'll say that one of the funniest scenes in the series to me is one he shares with Atomic Samurai. This episode focuses more on the guilt he feels from how much his unintentional lies and credit stealing has spiraled, and honestly it's some compelling stuff. I feel bad for him because he clearly never meant to end up in this spot, but he still has these heavy expectations on his shoulders. The way his flashbacks are framed with the monsters being so much larger than him helps to get across how overwhelming he finds it all. I think it's a neat idea to show how he reacts to a fearless robot challenging him after showing how he relies on scaring off potential opponents without having to lift a finger. And later on in the episode, I like the interactions he has with Saitama. I love how Saitama walks in unannounced to King's apartment, they have some comedic exchanges about the dating sim that King bought, and then later Saitama gives him genuine encouragement to get stronger, not harboring any malicious feelings over King benefiting from his work. After all, he does this hero thing for fun, not the admiration. And I love the flashback after King realizes who Saitama is. It's great at showing how much both of their positions in life have changed since then. Genos fighting the robot is a solid enough B-plot for the episode that starts kind of limp, but I like the creative ways he comes up with to take it out. And he gets a nice little scene with Dr. Kusuno agreeing to make him stronger. I do think some of the cuts between this and the A-plot are a little jarring, and I would have changed the points where they switch back and forth, but it's not too bad. The ending also sets up the next episode with Sonic and Fubuki both seeking Saitama, the Hero Association trying to build their numbers up, and the post-credit scene is our first teaser of Garo, which is cool. Overall, not nearly as strong of a premiere as the first season. That one established a more interesting internal conflict and had a way better fight scene at the end, but this season was still kicked off with a bang. It's got good jokes and emotional beats while setting up who would later become one of my favourite characters. It's an episode I love wholeheartedly, and I wish I didn't have such a middling first impression of it.
Hunting. No quarters required.
Episode 3, The Hunt Begins. I went into the season expecting it to not be as good as Season 1, but I was still hoping for at least one episode to be good enough to rank in Season 1's top half. I was able to breathe a sigh of relief pretty quickly because I already got one 3 episodes in. This is where the plot of the season really gets going. Garo had already started making his move, but now Saitama and the gang are aware of it, and Bang has summoned his brother to help him with his own hunt for his former student. Bang's motivation is set up here with him beating the shit out of Chiranko and expelling him, something that would normally be out of character for him, but this change in mood does help to set up that he has significant stakes in the Garo situation. Garo isn't sitting idly on the sidelines in this episode though. He's upping his game here by taking out a Class S hero in his opening fight scene, as well as all of his Tank Top brothers and Moomin Rider, my beloved. Each of his hunts this episode really helped to sell his overwhelming strength and adaptive skill, and I think the selection of heroes they chose for him to go after were pretty much perfect. None of them are major players that we feel like we'd be missing out on for the rest of the season, but they are characters we've gotten at least a little familiar with by this point, so there is some level of emotional attachment when seeing them get their teeth kicked in, even if that emotion is catharsis in some cases, but that's besides the point. It especially stings seeing Moomin get bodied right after he tried to save Garo, and the inclusion of Golden Ball and Spring Mustachio manages to retroactively give more of a point to the weakest segment of Season 1, good job. So yeah, this episode manages to sell the terror Garo now poses with some pretty cool and brutal action scenes and his awesome music theme to accompany it all. But it also shows that he does still have some element of humanity left in him as much as he doesn't want to admit it. He could have easily taken this kid's book by force, but he instead just talks to him like a person and leaves peacefully when he has the information he wants, since this is just an innocent kid, not a hero. Another thing this episode has going for it is that it's a lot comedically stronger than I remember. Saitama's visit to Chiranko in the hospital where he keeps putting bananas everywhere, his stare at the entry ticket for the tournament after he learns about the prize money, Garo's banter with Tario and the way he chops Golden Ball's glass in half, him performing a public service by decking this creep of a Hero Association representative in the face, then saying it felt like stepping in shit in comparison to the rush that he got from beating the previous heroes. I got a good few laughs out of this one. My favourite joke though is absolutely how the episode ends. Both Saitama and Garo misunderstanding what the other is after at the store, Garo's attack doing absolutely nothing, his terrified reaction as his sweat travels upwards, and then Saitama promptly knocking him out without a second thought, not even knowing that it's the hero hunter that got his hopes up hearing about, is such a comedically strong scene and one of my favourites in the show so far. This manages to stand out as one of my favourite episodes of the show. I can't think of any problems I particularly have with it, aside from maybe Garo standing completely still when some of the heroes are throwing out attacks at him. But in one case he was caught off guard and then was completely unconcerned because the hero was drunk, and in the other, Moomin stepped in before he had a chance to properly counterattack, so it's not a huge deal. Otherwise, the episode's a banger through and through.
I'm gonna break every bone in their body, and then I'm gonna kill them.
Episode 8, Resistance of the Strong. This entire episode is determined to continuously beat Suiryu down. Holy shit, this poor man. The whole plot for this one is that Goketsu shows up and gives monster cells to the tournament participants. Some of them take them and turn into monsters that Suiryu goes on to kill, some of them get knocked out by these big bird dudes. This episode is a big part of Suiryu's arc and a pivotal turning point for him. After getting humiliated by Saitama, he's not entirely happy with his by default win in the tournament. He gets his time to shine though by fighting back against the monsters to get a date from this girl, showing that he's still his usual cocky bastard self. But for as well as he takes down the small fries, Goketsu is still too much for him. After previously one-shotting Snack and Lightning Max, he takes the time absolutely demolishing Suiryu. He's as much of a martial arts master as anyone else there, but he takes every attack head on without flinching and then retaliates with the most minor of movements that manage to deal major damage. He wears him down and is content letting his bird minions finish up the job for him. But to Suiryu's shock, Snack and Max show back up decked out in their hero gear ready to help turn the tables, which they do by defeating the bird monsters, and then Suiryu is content with turning and running because he knows he doesn't stand a chance against the head honcho himself, which makes it all the more shocking to him that the heroes that are weaker than him stand their ground and are ready to continue the fight. They know they can't win, but the heroic values they have, the ones that Suiryu previously mocked, are what's allowing them to put their own lives at stake to give him a chance to escape. He doesn't get that chance though, as Bakuzan, who was previously thought to have keeled over and died, gets this really cool and menacing shot before spiking Suiryu back into the ground. Goketsu gets summoned back to HQ and puts Bakuzan in his place when he tries to rebel, then leaves him to torture Suiryu to his heart's content. The next scene both shows and tells us how messed up this dude is, as he continues to beat on an already defeated foe, causing him to scream in agony for the first time and to finally call out for help from a hero. Luckily for him, Saitama hears this call and swoops in before Bakuzan can land the killing blow. Then he prepares to fight him in the following episodes. Not much else to say about what happens here. It's a very straightforward episode that's entirely focused on this one plotline other than a brief cutaway to Garo picking a fight with Watchdog Man, which is our only source of humour in the episodes. But that's not a bad thing. The episode wants to be more serious in tone throughout, and I'm glad they didn't force any jokes in for the sake of it. It's definitely to the episode's benefit that the dire tone and brief glimpses of hope aren't undercut at all. The fights are good, Goketsu is a fairly menacing villain, it provides some good development for Suiryu by beating him down until he's forced to realise the value of having heroes to help, it's emotionally effective, yeah, this is all fantastic stuff. One of the few cases where I actually prefer the Season 2 episode over the accompanying episode number in Season 1. Sorry Deep Sea King, still love you.
You saved my life. I am your humble servant.
Episode 9, The Troubles of the Strongest. Wow, who could have foreseen that Episode 9 of a One Punch Man season would actually be pretty good? Obviously this doesn't hold a candle to Unyielding Justice, but it didn't need to in order for it to be one of my favourite episodes of the show so far. This perfectly wraps up the tournament and Suiryu's character arc. With Saitama taking out Bakuzan and saving Suiryu's life, demonstrating true heroism, it fully wins Suiryu over to the idea of heroes. His previously arrogant attitude is now replaced with genuine gratitude for what Saitama has done, and sadness as he goes off to hunt down Goketsu. Obviously we as the audience know that Saitama's gonna be fine, but it's pretty emotionally effective to see Suiryu lament on the fact that a true hero may have just died when he had so many more lives to save. He is fine of course though, as he shows when he comes back and asks Suiryu to keep the whole lying to enter the tournament thing under wraps. Saitama explains why he joined the tournament, Suiryu asks him if he thinks he could be a hero just like him, and Saitama encourages him, saying, I mean, if I can do it, anyone can. Then the scene is closed off with one of my favourite jokes in the series. Suiryu asks if Saitama would be willing to make him his disciple, to which Saitama responds with a hard no, and the scene ends before we even see Suiryu's response. This exchange gets me every time I think of it, it's so good. The next portion of the episode is spent delving into Saitama's headspace. He reflects on how he remains bored despite everything, and even though we know from seeing his actions that he does have genuine heroic qualities, it isn't enough for him to be satisfied with his life. He vents about this to King and gets some genuinely good advice in return. He might have attained unimaginable strength, but that doesn't mean his journey to become the greatest hero is at its end. He needs to work on his mentality, seek to challenge himself in other ways, and not just assume that strength is all there is to it. Admittedly, I do wish Saitama didn't brush it off by the end, but he is very clearly taking on board what King is telling him and acknowledging that everything he's saying is right. Hopefully it'll have more of a payoff later down the line with Saitama being able to reflect on it more, but for now it's a great scene anyway, with only one kind of off part. They then cross paths with Garo, who got his ass beat by Watchdog Man off screen, since that is that character's entire joke. And he goes in for the kill on King before Saitama kicks him into a wall and knocks him out once again. And as the two walk off to play some video games, Saitama mentions how interested he is in meeting the hero hunter in the hopes that he'll finally give him a challenge. God, I love this series' sense of humour. The rest of the episode gives us a good cliffhanger as the Monster Association sends a message to the Hero Association, Sonic getting gifted a monster cell and giving himself food poisoning by cooking it, and Puri Prisoner showing back up, my absolute favourite character, hooray. Much like his Season 1 appearance though, the dire jokes relating to him attacking people are kept to a minimum, and they're somewhat made up for by how he mistakes the civilian support as encouragement to hug the spike monster to death. I also kinda like the joke about how he stores his phone when he doesn't wear any clothes. It's the weakest scene in the episode, but it could have been worse and doesn't drag out for too long, so whatever, it's fine. It's not enough to detract from what is one of my favourite episodes of the show so far. It's consistently funny, gives a good look into plenty of characters' mentalities, has strong emotional moments, and closes out one of the season's arcs while enticing us for the big climactic final 3 episodes. It's phenomenal.
I beat them all.
Episode 11, The Varieties of Pride. Okay, I haven't given especially high praise to the action this season beyond, yeah, I mean this scene was pretty good I guess. So here's the episode to change that. This episode is almost entirely focused on Garo's battle with the Hero Association, with a few other bits and pieces thrown in here and there. To briefly touch on those, I like the further setup for Garo's backstory and the childhood isolation he felt. It was nice to see the flashback where Saitama inspired Gohan to improve himself after the Blizzard Bunch dumped him. King and Saitama playing video games again was funny and had one of the few standout facial expressions of the season to me, and I like like Saitama's worry over Genos potentially being dead getting him to head back out and go looking for him. The rest of this is all cool action with noticeably better animation than a lot of the rest of the season, and I'm here for it. Garo's battle with the 8 heroes is sick, and I like seeing him overcome the odds, splitting them up and whittling down their numbers. And naturally, Tario is terrified once he's taken them all out, which does seem to give Garo a little bit of internal conflict. But he doesn't have too much time to reflect on that before Genos shows up and starts kicking his ass. There are so many sick sequences in this fight. Garo using his legs to catch Genos by surprise and bury him when faced with an undodgeable move, but Genos using his new cover to surprise him back with an incineration cannon, Garo mimicking Watchdog Man's style to give a surprising payoff to the off-screen gag fight, calling back to his shake line as he breaks off an arm, but Genos uses that to tie him to a tree. God damn, man, I love this. It manages to give both of them plenty of moments to shine with their strategies constantly one-upping each other and not making the other seem like a dumbass for falling for it. Genos definitely has the edge, but Garo does still hold his own, and he's been through a lot of punishment these last few episodes, so that's fine. And much like with the other heroes, it ups the stakes for Garo with a confrontation that we're not sure how it's going to end. Maybe Genos will finally take out a main villain, or maybe Garo will escape to hunt another day. Well, until Bang and Bomb show up, that is, helping Genos dispose of the monsters that showed up at around the same time. Now Silverfang is handling Garo personally, and the episode ends with Garo in even more danger as his old mentor now beats the shit out of him while it flashes back to their first meeting. In a way, Silverfang was like a father figure to Garo, but he still feels remorse for training the hero hunter in the first place and now has to fix this mistake himself. Great stuff all around here, nothing I can call particularly weak. Other episodes this season have a stronger emotional punch to them, but this one's just so fun all the way through while lacking any of their slight weaknesses that I can't place this any lower. It's outdone by only one other.
As you can see, I've knocked over many chairs because I get so tilted at the towers.
Episode 12, The Cleaning of the Disciples' Mess. This is the only episode where I'm going to use an alternate translation of the title to the one on the Wikipedia article. I hate this one, it sounds rancid. Anyway, so the season peaks at the very end, you'll love to see it. This episode fills in the rest of Garo's backstory as his life flashes before his eyes while Bang and Bomb beat him half to death. Turns out he relates to monsters as the underdogs, since the popular kids at school always picked on him for finding them cool and beating him down whenever they played heroes. And when Garo had enough and fought back, he was single-handedly blamed while the ones who provoked him got off scot-free. It's honestly kinda sad that because of the young, impressionable age he was at when this all happened, it caused him to internalize it, become emotionally stunted because of how isolated he was, and go into his adult life with an incredibly flawed outlook. The anger from reliving this gets him to lash back out and seem like he's about to turn the tables. But this is where Phoenix Man steps in and carries him off to meet Orochi while bringing in Elder Centipede to handle the heroes on ground level. This could be seen as a cop-out, but I don't mind it really. Garo making any kind of comeback at this point in the fight would be a bit of an ass pull with the condition he's in, and it would make the other heroes look really pathetic. So this feels like a natural point for the Monster Association to swoop in and grab him. The fight with Elder Centipede is a really cool alternative. We'd seen him previously toss Metal Bit around, and now he reintroduces himself by acting as a living shield for Phoenix Man, tanking Genos' attack without a scratch. The stakes are set even higher now as the Monster Association strategist has determined that Bang's martial arts and Genos' firepower can't compete with Elder Centipede's enormous size. Side note, but I love that one of the 4 heroes they think can beat Elder Centipede is King. Our trio doesn't go down without a fight though. Bang and Bomb do a combo move that cracks the big bug's shell and forces him to molt. And I love how gross it looks when he grows his new face from inside his old one. And Genos stabbing him in the eyes before kicking through his teeth into his mouth and trying to explode him from the inside is just so fucking cool, man. They even managed a solid fake out death with Genos getting cut in half. But much like what they've shown with the rest of his body, he's more than able to pull himself back together. This entire fight is great because it manages to make Elder Centipede feel like this unstoppable force that our heroes can only slow down, but nothing either side does make the other look like a jobber at all. Ultimately though, it seems that Bang is going to have to sacrifice himself to allow the others to make a run for it, only for things to be interrupted by a familiar voice. King is calling to Elder Centipede from across the forest in an attempt to draw his attention so Saitama can land the killing blow, and I think this is a perfect character moment for him. He obviously can't win the fight himself, but he was able to use his status within the organization to get the information he needed about Elder Centipede's history with Blast, use that to lure him out, which he had to be the one to do since Saitama wasn't supposed to be privy to this information, and allow for the kill to be carried out with no casualties. After all the lying he'd unintentionally done, King has now done something deserving of the status as a hero. He might not have dealt the killing blow, but he was a crucial part of the plan and put himself in harm's way to make it happen, provoking the monster even in spite of his crippling fear. That's character development. I'm proud of you, buddy. And previously, I wasn't a fan of how the Serious Punch was handled this time around compared to how impactful it felt against Boros, but I don't mind it now. It's like Saitama learned from his previous mistakes with the collateral damage caused by him taking out other giant threats. This definitely wasn't an enemy that was strong enough to need a serious series move to take them out, but it being used to leave no corpse left to fall fits the narrative nicely. The punch is also animated really well, the sound design is impactful, and I love how the force travelling through Elder Centipede's body starts as a bunch of violent explosions tearing him apart before turning into a very peaceful disintegration. Plus, I find it really funny that the final boss of the season is beaten by Saitama letting off some steam after he got too tilted at a fighting game. Again, I really love this series humour. We then close out on the two hero parties meeting. They definitely were not that close before, but let's not worry about that. Saitama gives Genos the most nothing advice ever, which he takes as gospel, and our season ends with a post-credits teaser of an unconscious Garo being taken over to Orochi. It's an enticing teaser for the third season, while leaving this portion of the story wrapped up in a nice little bow with all the prominent antagonists taken out. And that was One Punch Man Season 2. Overall, despite the problems it faced along the way and not hitting close to Season 1's peaks, I still had an amazing time with this. I was glad to see how well it held up after me having not rewatched it since its initial release. Even at its lowest, there was never an episode I could say I disliked, and the highs were phenomenal. If you haven't watched the season in a while or were put off by the less than positive reception it got compared to Season 1, and even the accompanying second season of Mob Psycho, I'd say it's worth checking out even if it isn't as good as either of those. And hell, if you haven't seen the show at all, well, I don't know why you considered this a good way to spend half an hour, but I'd maybe consider starting it from the beginning. It's only 24 episodes, what do you got to lose? And if you like it enough, maybe read ahead in the manga or the webcomic. Of course, there's every chance you might have already seen it and not liked it, which is totally fair. No series is going to appeal to everyone. Though, again, I have to wonder why this was your video of choice to put on while you ate dinner or whatever. But if these videos have managed to get even a handful of people to check out this show, then that's a win in my book. I adore One Punch Man more than I could ever really describe. It's easily one of my favourite works of fiction, and I've had a blast putting these videos together, almost exclusively praising it. I'm so excited to see how Season 3 turns out, especially if MAPPA ends up animating it like what's been rumoured. If that's the case, then I'm as confident it will be great as I am confident that the live-action movie with the Amazing Spider-Man 2 writing team will crash and burn. Maybe I'll review those once they come out, who knows. For now, this is where I'm going to leave things off. Thank you for watching and listening to me ramble for half an hour. Have a good one.